Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. My latest book, Kowabana Volume 12, is now out. Collecting even more of your favourite stories from the show, you can find creepy ghosts, abandoned buildings, haunted shrines, fascinating monsters, and much, much more. You can find that on Amazon right now and help support the show at the same time. This week, we're looking at some mysterious tales that will keep you guessing as to what's really going on, and how such a thing could be possible in the first place. First up, we're delving into a popular urban legend in the Tokyo region. This is one forest you should most definitely avoid. Find out why in Tsunoda Forest. It happened during the summer holidays of 6th grade. My friends H and T were playing in Tsunoda Forest when H suggested they visit the abandoned house towards the rear. We often played in the forest at the time, but only to jump from the small cliffs facing the path or to hang from the vines and pretend we were Tarzan. We never actually went further into the forest. Of course, we knew about the abandoned house back there, and there were rumours that some of the braver kids from school snuck in there and saw something one time. The sun was still high in the sky, but T was kind of a coward, so he apparently said they shouldn't go near it. H ignored him, however, and, in the end, went there by himself, while T waited for him by the small cliffs. Not long after he disappeared into the trees, suddenly T heard a scream, and then H came running back out in full panic mode. Sensing something was wrong, T ran ahead of H as fast as he could, and the pair ran all the way to the nearby temple before finally stopping. As they caught their breath, T looked at H's face and saw that he was pale and his eyes vacant. His left cheek alone, for some reason, was red. Worried that he wasn't talking, T dragged H back to his house. Then, when he finally calmed down, he told him what happened at the abandoned house. H walked through the trees and stopped in front of the abandoned house. The windows were broken and the walls were falling apart. It looked like it hadn't been touched in several decades. The strange atmosphere there almost overwhelmed him, but he summoned up all his courage and then reached out for the handle of the sliding door. At that moment, an elderly woman who appeared to be in her 70s suddenly jumped out and grabbed his wrist. H was so surprised that he couldn't speak, and then an elderly man around the same age came out from the side of the house. "Boy, what are you doing here?" he said in a deep, husky voice. The man was holding a knife. I'm sorry, H apologized, panicking, but the old woman squeezed his wrist tight and refused to let go. The old man then stepped in front of him and looked down at his face. Then he slapped H's cheek as hard as he could. That seemed to wake him up, and H shook off the old woman and then ran back towards T in the forest. I heard all this during swim class at school the following day alongside Y, who was another close friend of ours. According to H, the old man and woman were definitely real people, not ghosts. It was hard to believe that anyone could live out there, but T saw H's cheek and it really was red and swollen, and I didn't think H was a very good liar, so I believed him. The only thing was that T didn't hear any noises or voices coming from the direction of the house while H was being held there. Yeah, it wasn't that far from the entrance of the forest to the house. For a while after that, we didn't go near the forest. But then one day, about a week later, we were playing on the 7th floor of Daiei when H suddenly said, "Why don't we go over there tonight?" After that horrible experience he had there, what on earth is he thinking? I thought. But looking back on it now, H acted like he was the big kid around town, so he probably didn't want to feel like he'd lost face with us. T immediately objected, but Y was incredibly keen. "Let's go! Let's go! It'll be fine," he said, pestering both T and I to give in. I didn't want to go either, but I also didn't want to look like a coward. So, in the end, after Y kept going on, I finally said, "Yeah, alright, whatever." In the end, T decided not to go because his parents wouldn't let him outside at night. And so, at 9:30 p.m. the next day, we all met in front of the Salesian church. We left our bikes there and then walked over to Tsunoda Forest. The forest was pretty creepy even during the day, but at night, the atmosphere was indescribable. It was like the entrance to a demon world or a nest of evil spirits or something like that. At any rate, the aura coming off it seemed to tell us not to come any closer. I was terrified. "Let's not go in. This place is dangerous," I said, but Y and H ignored me. "What are you talking about? We've already come this far. Come on," they said, and started climbing the cliff. I wanted to run away, but I was too scared to go back to the church by myself, and I didn't want to wait in the forest by myself, so in the end, I reluctantly followed them, almost in tears. It was so dark that we could barely see anything. We groped around with our hands, trying not to make any noise, until finally we found ourselves in front of the house. My heart raced, pounding wildly. Ignoring my fear, Y went around to the side of the house and then looked through one of the broken windows. I don't know if he was just trying to act tough or if he really was just that brave, but I watched him in disbelief. Even H, who suggested we come here in the first place, still stood beside me. "What the hell? Nobody's here." Y turned on his torch and then pointed it at H and I. "Come on, let's go in." Y passed by us as we crouched and reached for the door. Unlike its battered appearance, for some reason I still clearly remember how smoothly that door opened. Y moved his light around the room and then turned back to us. "It's all good. Let's go in." H stood up first and went in. I followed. The way Y spoke so calmly was almost an anticlimax, or like it made us lose any sense of reality. Both Y and H held their torches up in the room, and it was surprisingly clean. Which is to say, there wasn't really much there to begin with. The only thing in there was an altar at the back of the room, lit up by Y's torch, and that really wasn't so much of an altar as a small rectangular table. On either side were cups with sake and small flower vases, which looked more like weeds than flowers, and in the middle there was a talisman. Huh? Jinka? How the hell do you read this? Y said as he looked at the talisman. I wasn't very good at kanji, but I looked at it as well and had no idea how to read the character on it. It looked like it might be some sort of sutra. Then H, who had been quiet all that time, suddenly kicked the table. It flipped over with a crash and we turned to look at him in surprise. "Payback," he said as he looked down at the table. But then we suddenly heard something, almost like a roar, that sounded uncomfortably close and incredibly unpleasant. It was kind of like when an earthquake hits and you can hear the sound of the earth rumbling far away, but somebody was screaming that sound instead. It was horrifying. Not even able to scream, I tore out of the house and ran into the darkness of the forest. Y and H soon followed me, pulling each other as they ran. We tripped and fell over tree roots and such numerous times, but we finally hit the cliff and slid down it and out of the forest. When we reached the church, we jumped right on our bikes and pedaled as fast as we could to get away from there. It was like I unconsciously pedaled faster and faster as I made my way towards home, and I didn't even know where the other two went. I just felt like something was following me, so all I could remember is pedaling as fast as I possibly could. I'd never felt such fear before in my life. By the time I got home, I was out of breath and I ran into my parents' room and dove under the covers. My mother was surprised to see me. "What's wrong? What happened?" She asked me several times, but all I could say was, "Nothing." Instinctively, I knew I shouldn't tell anyone what happened. And then, at some point, I fell asleep. The next morning, my mother asked me what happened the night before. I was apparently still shaking. I lied and said that I got chased by a weirdo on my way home from my friend's house. She seemed to believe it, but she forbade me from leaving the house again that night. I skipped out on swim class that day, and while I was at home, I got a call from Y. We agreed to meet. When I arrived at his house, H and T were also there, and we got to talking about what happened the night before. All three of us heard that voice, and apparently, when Y ran from the house, something grabbed his ankle. After that, we all managed to get home safely. Y and I asked H why he kicked over the altar, but again he simply said, "It was just payback." Looking back on it, we went to that house so H could reclaim his honor, but Y was acting like nothing scared him, so he probably kicked it to show he was brave too. We agreed to keep what happened between the four of us, T included. We talked about it once in a while, but after that, we never went back to Tsunoda Forest again. Time passed, and the four of us graduated. T went to a private junior high, and the rest of us went to the same public junior high, but we ended up in different classes, and Y and H started hanging out with some bad kids, so we mostly lost contact. But then, 5 years later, I suddenly heard a phrase I never expected to hear again: Tsunoda Forest. During the summer holidays of my second year at high school, I returned home one day to my mother asking me a question. "I got some strange voicemails. Do you know who this is?" I listened right away. "This is Professor from Tokyo University." It was a man's voice, probably in his 50s or 60s, but the message cut out here and there, and I couldn't make out what he was saying. But then I froze. "There's something I want to talk to Kei-kun about. It's about Tsunoda Forest." Kei was my name. "Please call me back at this number." Then the message ended. "Yeah, I don't know. I think they called the wrong number," I said, but I went to my room with my heart pounding. Confused, I tried to put together what it all might mean. Why did a professor from Tokyo know about something that only the four of us were supposed to know about? Did one of the other three blab? Or maybe I accidentally mentioned it to a friend in junior or high school and they leaked it. No, it must have been a prank from one of those three guys. But how would they pull off a prank like that? No matter how you looked at it, that was the voice of a middle-aged man. In the end, I wasn't able to find any answer to the mystery. And even if I wanted to call him back, I could only make out a few digits of the phone number. I tried to find a similar number for a Tokyo University professor in the phone book, but I only had 4 digits, so it was useless. And the professor never called me back either. For the next week or so, I tried contacting my friends, not the 3 who knew about the forest, to see if I could get some answers, but nobody knew anything. And as more time passed, I got busier with daily life and ended up forgetting about the call. 2 years later, I was reminded of Tsunoda Forest again. I was taking a year off to study for university entrance exams when I ran into T by chance at a summer course. I hadn't seen him since the first summer of junior high. We had lunch together and chatted about the old days. Then I suddenly remembered that strange phone call, so I asked him about it. For a moment, his face clouded over. "Did something happen to you too?" he asked. Apparently a year earlier, he also got a call during the summer, so when he was in his final year of high school, and it was the same as the voicemail I got. The person on the other end apparently didn't say they were a university professor, but they did mention Tsunoda Forest. But just like me, it was hard to hear the voice in parts. He was unable to decipher the phone number, and the person never called back again. We didn't go too much further into it at the time, but I couldn't help but feel like something strange had happened. I wondered if maybe he was lying, trying to make his story align with mine, but I never told him the details of the voicemail, like the voice being hard to hear in parts. So it was likely true that he received a phone call the same as I did. I saw T every day for the next 2 weeks of the course, and then we went our separate ways. "Let's hang out again once you start university," he said. I studied hard, passed my entrance exams, and then life got incredibly busy. During the summer of my 3rd year at university, H passed away. He took his own life. He was living alone near Shimokitazawa at the time, and apparently he jumped from the 8th floor of his apartment building late one night. He was found lying near the water tank the next morning by the caretaker. T and I got in touch again and attended his wake together. We heard numerous stories there from his old junior high classmates and such. Apparently, he was addicted to drugs and nobody had seen him for a while. He also left behind a note saying, "I can't bear it anymore. I want to die and be at peace. I'm sorry." I lit some incense and then drank some sake, and then a friend of H's came to see T and I. I was wondering if you know someone called Nishina," he asked. "I think this person knew H." This friend heard from H's parents that there was a notebook on the desk in his room, and the word Nishina was apparently scrawled all throughout it. But it wasn't even just one notebook. They found several, and they were all the same. They had the word Nishina scribbled everywhere. "I think it might have been that girl who was after him," the friend said, but neither T nor I had seen H for years, so we didn't know anything. "Nishina? I wonder what that means," T said after the friend left. The moment he said it, an image of the talisman we saw in the torchlight at that house that night flashed in my mind. Nishina. Those same characters could also be read another way. Jinka. Yeah, no doubt about it. Those were the 2 characters we'd seen on the talisman. I couldn't remember what else was written on it, but I clearly remembered Y saying Jinka out loud. I couldn't stop the chills from running up and down my spine, and after leaving the wake, I spoke to T about it on the way home. "You shouldn't think too much about it," he said, tears in his eyes. "Let's just forget everything that happened." We fell silent and then went our separate ways. I attended the farewell ceremony the next day, but T didn't come. Y didn't attend either the wake or the farewell ceremony, but I heard that he moved to Chiba a few years prior, so I wondered what he was up to there. Nobody seemed to know. After H's funeral, I didn't see T again. Now, I don't know whether those strange phone calls had anything to do with H's death. It might have just been a coincidence. There's also no way to confirm whether H was really held by that elderly couple or not either. But either way, I still regret going to that house that night. I should have done everything in my power to stop H and Y. And I should have stopped myself from writing all about the forest here as well. Next, some kids go digging in the mountains to find bugs, but a mysterious stranger warns them to stop. Why? Find out in You'll Turn into a Monster. This happened when I was just a kid. One day, my brother came home with lots of rhinoceros beetle larvae. I wanted to get some myself, so I asked him where he got them, but he wouldn't tell me. I thought he must have gotten them from the mountain behind our house, so the next day I went there with 2 of my friends. But we were young, so we didn't know where we might find them. We dug holes everywhere, but of course we weren't able to find anything. We went further into the mountain and then we found a spot where the dirt was a different colour to the surrounding areas. It has to be here! We were so happy that we started digging right away. Suddenly, we heard a voice coming from behind us. "What are you doing?" We all turned around and a man we didn't know was standing there. "We're looking for beetle larvae," we said. "You won't find any there. You should look somewhere else," he replied gently. "But we saw signs of digging here, so there has to be some," we said and started digging again. After a short pause, the man suddenly spoke in a quiet voice. "If you keep digging, you'll turn into a monster." Hearing the word monster, we all suddenly stopped. The man smiled and then grabbed my hand, dragging us to another spot where we finally found some. I remember that his hand was shaking the whole time. Looking back on it now, I wonder what was buried there. Also, the fact he said, "You'll turn into a monster," and not, "You'll find a monster," was weird. I don't know if maybe he just misspoke, but either way, it's all buried in that mountain. The person in this next story experiences a strange stalker, but things get even weirder when they discover why they're being hassled. Find out in You're in Danger. One night, there was this guy following me on the way home. I didn't pay him much attention, but suddenly, another guy on a bike appeared behind me and told me to get on. I thought he was a bit suspicious, so I asked him why. He said there was a man behind me holding a knife, and that I was in danger. As we were talking, the guy who was walking behind me passed by without a care in the world. And, well, nothing happened at the time, but a few days later, I got home to find my place had been burgled and ransacked. The criminal was soon caught thanks to an eyewitness account from a neighbour. It turned out to be the guy who lived next door to me. He was a university student, and he said he couldn't bear the noises coming from my apartment anymore, so he decided to kill me. He was apparently the guy from that night. That's what I heard during several questioning sessions. But that apartment belonged to my parents, and I only used it as a studio, so usually it was empty. So, there shouldn't have been any noise coming from there that would have upset him so much. Even now, I still don't really understand what happened. Some high school kids on a trip decide to head out for a little fun, but while on the beach they come across something horrifying. Something that will continue to haunt them for the rest of their lives. Literally. Find out what in Give My Baby Back. This happened to me in high school about 10 years ago, when we were on a school trip to the beach. Each group was allocated a hotel room, and I was in a group with A, B, and C. We were all so-called delinquents, and when all the other groups went to sleep at night, of course, we didn't. One night, we decided to check out the girls' rooms, and everyone was in agreement. But the girls in our class are the worst, so let's check out the other classes, B said. So, we decided to check out another hotel a short distance away that another class was staying in. At the time, we didn't realize that C had yet to say a single word. I called the pager of a girl from another class ahead of time and asked her to let us in, and then we slipped out of our hotel. Behind the hotel was a sandy beach, so we walked along the coastline in the moonlight towards the other class's hotel. We must have walked about 50 meters or so when it happened. C muttered something under his breath. "I don't like this place. We should go back." He was always so lively and laughed at everything, so it was the first time I'd ever heard him speak in such a serious tone. Of course, we were kind of anxious when he said that, but then A tried to break the weird atmosphere that fell over us. "What? Are you psychic or something? You sure you aren't just scared?" No, everyone was trying to get rid of that strange mood, so we all laughed. "No, that's not it at all. Whatever happens to you ain't my problem," C then yelled, but we refused to back down. "You're an idiot. Come on, let's go," B said, and we all followed him. C also followed, but in silence. After we'd walked another 100 meters or so, we saw a figure by the water about 10 or 20 meters away. This person appeared to be looking out over the ocean as they walked. Thinking it might be a teacher on patrol, we all ducked behind a nearby cliff. The figure gradually got larger as they walked towards us, but there was something odd about them. Then, finally, they were close enough to see who they were. It was a woman with long hair. "Isn't it a bit weird for a woman to be out at this hour?" A said. "Maybe she's just out for a walk," I said. "Maybe she's sleepwalking," B said. We all said things off the top of our head, but then, suddenly, I remembered C. I turned to look at him and he was trembling as he whispered something. I leaned in to hear him. "Help me, help me," he was muttering over and over. The woman stopped to look out over the sea in a spot where we could see her, meaning her back was just a short distance away from us. As you might imagine, I had a bad feeling about all of this, and that feeling just got stronger, so I signaled to everyone that we should go back. But they weren't the type of guys to listen, so for the time being, B signaled we should wait for her to pass, and we watched her in silence. Then, suddenly, the woman started to scream. "Give my baby back! Give my baby back!" She was making such a fuss that it was messing up her hair, and we were now scared and panicking too, although we still couldn't speak up and run. Maybe she wasn't in her right mind, so we decided to stay still and watch her for a little longer. I don't know how much time passed, but the woman continued screaming towards the water. Then, suddenly, she turned to face us and ran straight at us. You! I'm pretty sure she screamed something like that. We all panicked and ran, but C alone ran towards the woman. "Hey, what are you doing? Run!" we screamed. But he didn't even turn to look at us. He just screamed and kept running. To be honest, we didn't have time to deal with C. We all ran as fast as we could back to the hotel, then waited as we trembled and tried to catch our breath. But after some time had passed, C still hadn't returned. We had calmed down, but now we were worried about him. Nobody said the words out loud, but we all returned to that same spot on the beach together. Just in case, we had weapons with us this time too. Nervously, we approached that spot on the beach together, but we couldn't see anyone anywhere. We thought that maybe if someone had been there, they fled when they saw us, but there really was nobody around. And that included C. We looked all around, but he was nowhere to be seen. Panicked and scared, we had no choice but to return to the teacher's room and tell them that C was missing. We told them the whole story, but they didn't believe us because of our usual bad behaviour. Getting nowhere, we returned to our room, and when we got there, waited for C to return. Naturally, nobody was able to fall asleep. We must have waited several hours, and just as we were starting to doze off, suddenly a voice woke me up. "Hey, get up!" The teacher's voice woke us. The moment I saw his face, I expected the worst. And I was right on the money. That morning, a fisherman found C's dead body. He had drowned. It was suspicious, however, because they found his body in shallow water. It wasn't that he drowned somewhere else and floated there. His footprints were in the sand, and only his face was in the water, meaning that was where he drowned. It was like someone held his head there until he died. We each went our separate ways after that. A went to Osaka, B started work in Tokyo, and I went to university in Kyoto. About a year and a half after we graduated, during the summer, something bad happened again. B passed away. He went swimming and was apparently swallowed by a wave. He drowned. After his funeral, A and I tried not to connect B and C's deaths, saying it was just a coincidence, but we were honestly afraid. Time passed and not much else happened, and I put their deaths behind me. 5 years passed after our graduation. A got married and had a daughter. I had to stay in university to get more credits, but I was enjoying myself. Then one day, I got a call. It was a man I didn't recognize, and he said something startling. "This is A's wife's father. A-kun drowned at the beach." He went to the beach with his family, and apparently was in a boat with his 2-year-old daughter when she fell into the sea like something had called her in. A jumped in to save her, but she kept struggling, and apparently it didn't go very well. His wife, unable to swim, desperately tried to find help, but both A and his daughter passed away. After that, she broke down and still hasn't recovered. 5 years have passed since then, but I'm still alive. However, when I look at the sleeping face of my own 2-year-old daughter, I remember those words. "Give my baby back. Give my baby back." Be careful coming across the man from this next story. Run-ins with this urban legend tend to result in people turning up dead. Find out why in Ooi-san. I don't know who or what exactly Ooi-san is, but he was rather famous amongst workers at my local convenience store. One of my senior colleagues once told me that if somebody came into the store by the name of Ooi-san, then I shouldn't look him in the eyes. But, of course, a few days later, I'd already forgotten that conversation. 3 months or so passed and I got used to the job, and then someone new started as well. I took him under my wing and things were pretty chill for a while. One night, that senior colleague and the new guy were working the front while I was having a cigarette break in the back and eating the bento boxes that were about to be discarded. At the time, I could only see 3 teens around junior high age in the store reading the magazines, and the new guy was carefully watching them to make sure they didn't steal anything. I scrolled through the 3 cameras we had, watching over the store as well, when I noticed the new guy was punching away at the register, even though nobody was there. Wondering what he was doing, he then pressed the buzzer to alert staff members in the back of the store. Someone's stealing, I thought, but when I walked out, I saw an old man standing in front of the register. I wondered if it was a customer who came in after the new guy's sign. "Welcome," I said in a loud voice. "Hello, I'm Ooi-san," he suddenly replied. What did he say? I thought, but then the new guy summoned me over. "That's Ooi-san. He's really here," he said as I got closer. "The guy the boss told us about. We can't look at his eyes." Fortunately, Ooi-san had his back to me when the new guy called me over, so I didn't see his face, but then he spoke to us again. Could I get some mild 7, this gum, and also some fried chicken, please?" The new guy worked the register while I grabbed the smokes and chicken and put them in a bag. "Oh, and I'd also like one of your lives," Ooi-san then suddenly said, in a joking manner. What the hell? I thought. "I'm terribly sorry. We don't sell those here," I replied with my head down, returning the joke. "One of those 3 over there is fine. Please give me one," he said. The 3 junior high kids chatting by the magazines didn't seem to hear any of this. Neither of us knew what to say. We looked at each other, confused as to what to do. "I'm terribly sorry, but they're not products of this store," I said. Ooi-san laughed. "Ha ha ha ha. Well then, I'll take all of them," he said, putting down some money and 3 strange wireworks. The next day, I told the manager and the part-timer lady who started work long before me about what happened the night before. "Are you serious? Did Ooi-san leave anything?" the manager asked, so I handed him the wireworks. He said that the next time Ooi-san came in, we should give those back to him, so I put them in a visible spot in the back room. I went to work again the next night, and the new guy came running out of the back room crying. I asked him what was wrong, and he said the wireworks were moving around. There was no way, I thought, so I went to check for myself, and they really were squirming around like worms. They continued moving for the next few days, but only at night. The other guys who had long worked at the store found it creepy. A few days later, the movement on one of them started to weaken. That same day, a junior high student was crossing the road on their bike near the store and got hit by a car. They died. It was even on the news, and the driver said they saw the student on the bike riding erratically, and then they suddenly slammed on the brakes when they saw someone standing in front of the bike, which was when the accident occurred. The next night, the manager and another senior colleague were working when Ooi-san appeared. They returned the 3 wireworks to him. "I'm terribly sorry." According to my colleague, Ooi-san was holding the student's head as he came into the store. The manager was shocked when he saw it, but he told my colleague to get the wireworks from out the back. And on the cameras, he said he only saw the student's body. It seemed to be fumbling around under the register, looking for something. Other than that, the only thing he saw on the cameras was the manager. I have a friend who works at a different convenience store, and another who works nights part-time at a video store that's open until 2 a.m, and both of them have heard of Ooi-san as well. Is he really that common of a story at convenience stores around the country? And finally this week, a run-in with an apparently faulty elevator leaves a young man questioning what on earth happened, and what might have happened if things had been done only slightly differently. Find out why in Before one's eyes. Just the other week, there was a problem with the elevator when I was on my way home from my friend's place. I pressed the button next to the door, and the doors opened immediately, even though the elevator wasn't there. Oh crap, I thought, but I wasn't scared. I knew it was a rare happening and even a little dangerous, but that was about it. But even so, it wasn't every day you got to see something like this, I thought. So I got a little closer and then looked into the open space down below. Of course, it was dark and hard to see anything, but thanks to the lights in the hall, I could see what looked like thick pipes down below. Anyway, it was hard to see, so as I strained to look closer, the elevator suddenly came rushing down from above. There was no sound or anything, so I had no time to react. It just came speeding down out of nowhere, missing my nose by about 5 centimeters. I was so afraid that I turned to run back to my friend's place. But then I heard a sound from behind me, like a ping. I turned around and the elevator doors opened, like nothing had happened. Of course, there was no time for the doors to close after I turned, and no sign they had closed either. I was so confused that I didn't know if I was daydreaming or maybe being tricked by a kitsune. The elevator doors remained open for a few moments, and then closed. After that, I didn't return to my friend's place, but I didn't use the elevator either. I took the stairs back down. I still get chills when I think about what might have happened if I stuck my head further in to look down the empty elevator shaft that time. I debated contacting the elevator company, but I'm not sure I could explain what happened very well, so I decided to just put it all behind me. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Cummy tier members, Christina and S-. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 12, out on Amazon right now, and check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Kowabana Japan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.